Bus driver insults autistic teen, then finds out who his parents are. The morning started off like any other. People hustled and bustled on the sidewalks, coffee in hand, hurrying to get to work or school. The streets were alive with the usual chaos of city life. For Ryan, a quiet autistic teenager, mornings like these were a challenge. The noise, the constant motion, the unpredictable energy of the world around him, it was all overwhelming. But today, he was determined. Today, he was going to his school's science exhibition to present his project, something he had worked tirelessly on for weeks. Ryan clutched his neatly organized poster board tightly in one hand, his other hand holding his noise-canceling headphones close to his ears. His mother had encouraged him to take the bus alone, reminding him that it was important to build his independence. Though he was hesitant at first, Ryan had agreed. He wanted to prove to her, and himself, that he could do it. The bus pulled up to the curb, hissing as it stopped. Ryan hesitated for a moment before stepping aboard, glancing nervously at the driver. The man sitting behind the wheel was older, with a hardened face and a demeanor that screamed impatience. He barely glanced at Ryan as he climbed aboard. "Come on, kid, you holding up the line?" the driver grumbled, tapping his fingers on the fare box. Ryan fumbled with his bus card, trying to scan it, but his hands trembled slightly. He could feel the stares of the passengers behind him, and the pressure made it even harder for him to focus. His heart raced as he swiped the card again, unsuccessfully. "Seriously," the driver snapped, his voice loud and sharp. "How hard is it to scan a card? Just move, will ya?" Ryan froze, his chest tightening. He could feel the panic rising in him, the overwhelming wave of emotions that made it hard to think, to move, to breathe. He wanted to explain, to tell the driver that he was trying, but the words wouldn't come out. He just stood there, his face flushing with embarrassment. "What's the matter with you, kid? You deaf or something?" the driver barked, leaning closer. A woman sitting near the front stood up, her voice cutting through the tension. "Hey, leave him alone. He's just a kid." The driver waved her off dismissively. "Mind your own business, lady. If he can't figure out how to pay, he shouldn't be riding the bus." Ryan's eyes welled up with tears, but he bit his lip and forced himself to move. He quickly shuffled past the driver and found an empty seat near the back of the bus. He pulled his knees up to his chest and put his headphones on, trying to block out the noise, the stares, and the weight of humiliation pressing down on him. The bus ride felt like an eternity. Every bump and jolt made Ryan clutch his poster board tighter, as if it were the only thing anchoring him. He focused on his breathing, on the familiar rhythm of the music playing through his headphones. But the driver's words echoed in his mind, louder than the music could drown out. At the next stop, more passengers got on. Ryan kept his head down, avoiding eye contact, but he couldn't help but notice the driver's loud, abrasive tone as he barked instructions at an elderly man struggling with his walker. It wasn't just him, Ryan realized. The driver seemed to treat everyone with the same impatience and disdain. A few stops later, a woman in a sharp business suit boarded the bus, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke in a calm but authoritative tone. She was followed closely by a man in a crisp navy blue suit, carrying a leather briefcase. The two of them exuded an air of confidence and importance, their presence commanding attention. Ryan barely looked up, too preoccupied with his own thoughts, but the driver's tone shifted immediately. "Morning, ma'am, sir," the driver said, his voice suddenly polite and deferential. The woman gave a curt nod and took a seat near the front, while the man stood, holding onto one of the overhead bars. They continued their conversation in low voices, but Ryan noticed the subtle glances they exchanged as the bus moved forward. It wasn't until a few stops later that the incident happened. The driver slammed on the brakes abruptly, sending passengers lurching forward. Ryan's headphones slipped off his ears, and he clung to the seat in front of him to steady himself. The poster board he had worked so hard on fell to the floor, the carefully arranged pieces scattering. "Hey, watch it," one of the passengers yelled, glaring at the driver. "Sorry," the driver said flatly, though his tone lacked any real apology. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, landing on Ryan, who was now scrambling to pick up his project pieces. "What's going on back there? You making a mess, kid?" Ryan froze, his hands hovering over the fallen poster board. He felt the stares of the other passengers again, the heat rising in his cheeks. He started, but his voice was barely a whisper. The driver scoffed, shaking his head. Figures. That was the final straw for the woman in the business suit. She stood up, her expression steely as she walked to the front of the bus. "Pull over," she said firmly. The driver blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" "I said pull over," the woman repeated, her voice calm but commanding. "No." The man in the navy suit joined her, his expression just as serious. "Do as she says," he added. The driver hesitated, clearly taken aback, but the authority in their voices left no room for argument. He pulled the bus to the side of the road, his jaw tightening. "What's this about?" he demanded. "If you've got a problem." "Oh, we have a problem," the woman said, her voice sharp. "Your treatment of this young man is unacceptable." The driver glanced at Ryan, who was still on the floor, trying to gather his project. "What? The kid can't even—" "Enough," the man in the navy suit interrupted, his tone cutting through the driver's excuses. "Do you have any idea who this boy is?" The driver frowned, his bravado faltering. "What are you talking about?" The woman turned to Ryan, her expression softening. "Ryan," she said gently, walking toward him. "Are you all right?" Ryan looked up at her, his eyes wide with surprise. "I'm okay," he stammered. She knelt beside him, helping him pick up the scattered pieces of his project. "You're doing great, sweetheart. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." The man in the navy suit crouched beside them, placing a reassuring hand on Ryan's shoulder. "We're proud of you, son." Ryan's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't expected to see them here, not like this. The driver's eyes widened as realization dawned on him. "Wait, this kid is?" "That's right," the woman said, standing up and fixing the driver with a cold glare. "He's our son. And I'll tell you something else," the man added, his voice steady and authoritative. "We're not just any parents. I'm Thomas Carter, head of Carter Enterprises. And this is my wife, Elaine Carter, founder of the Bright Futures Foundation for Children with Special Needs." The color drained from the driver's face. I didn't know." "You didn't care," Elaine said, her voice cutting. "You didn't bother to show an ounce of patience or kindness to someone who needed it. And from what I've seen, this isn't the first time you've treated passengers this way." Thomas nodded, his expression grim. "We'll be filing a formal complaint with the Transit Authority. People like you have no business working in public service." The driver stammered, his bravado completely gone. I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "Your apology means nothing to me," Elaine said sharply. "But you owe one to our son." The driver turned to Ryan, his face pale. "I'm sorry, kid. I didn't mean to." Ryan didn't respond. He simply nodded, clutching his poster board tightly. The bus sat motionless on the side of the road, its passengers silent as the tense scene unfolded. Ryan kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with the driver as he carefully put the last pieces of his project back into place. His parents, Thomas and Elaine, stood protectively on either side of him, their composed demeanor masking the anger that simmered beneath the surface. "Ryan," Elaine said softly, kneeling beside him again. "Is your project all right? Did anything get damaged?" Ryan glanced at the poster board, running his fingers along the edges to check for creases or tears. "I think it's okay," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Elaine smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair out of his eyes. "Good. You worked so hard on this, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you for staying calm." Thomas stood nearby, his arms crossed as he stared down the driver. "Let's get one thing straight," he said, his voice firm but controlled. "Ryan is an exceptional young man, and he doesn't deserve to be treated like this. No one does. If you can't find the basic decency to treat passengers with respect, you have no business sitting in that seat." The driver swallowed hard, his earlier arrogance completely gone. I wasn't trying to be mean. I didn't know he was." "You didn't need to know," Elaine interrupted, standing to face him. "Kindness shouldn't be reserved for people you think are important. It should be a given. Every single person who steps onto your bus deserves to be treated with dignity." The passengers murmured in agreement, several nodding as they watched the confrontation. One woman, the same one who had defended Ryan earlier, spoke up. "She's right. I've seen how you treat people. You snap at everyone, act like you're better than the rest of us. It's not okay." The driver's face reddened, but he said nothing. He glanced at the rearview mirror, avoiding Elaine's piercing gaze. After a few moments of silence, Thomas sighed and turned to Ryan. "Do you want to stay on this bus, or would you rather we call for a car to take you to the exhibition?" Ryan hesitated, looking between his parents and the other passengers. He didn't want to cause more trouble, but the thought of sitting on the bus with the driver who had humiliated him made his chest tighten. I think I'd rather leave," he said softly. Elaine nodded, her expression understanding. "All right, sweetheart. Let's go." She helped Ryan to his feet, taking his poster board while Thomas placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. As they made their way to the door, the other passengers began clapping, a quiet but powerful show of support for the young man who had been unfairly targeted. "Good for you, kid," one man said with a smile. "You've got nothing to be ashamed of. Keep your head up," added the woman who had spoken out earlier. "You're stronger than you know." Ryan managed a small smile, the encouragement lifting some of the weight off his chest. He glanced back at the driver one last time, but the man avoided his gaze, staring straight ahead with a grim expression. Once they were off the bus, Elaine pulled out her phone to call for a car. Ryan stood close to her, his shoulders still tense. Thomas crouched down to meet his son's eyes, his voice gentle. "Ryan," he said, "I know that wasn't easy, but I'm so proud of you. You handled yourself with so much strength today." Ryan looked down at his sneakers, his fingers tightening around the strap of his backpack. I don't understand why he had to be so mean." Thomas sighed, his heart aching at the pain in his son's voice. Sometimes people lash out because they're unhappy with their own lives. It's not fair and it's not right, but it's not your fault. Elaine placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder, her voice soft but firm. "You did nothing wrong, sweetheart. You have every right to take up space in this world, just like anyone else." Ryan nodded slowly, his parents' words beginning to sink in. The car arrived a few moments later, and they climbed in, heading toward the exhibition. As the city streets blurred past the window, Ryan focused on his project, going over every detail in his mind to make sure he was ready. When they arrived at the exhibition, the venue was already buzzing with energy. Students from all over the city were setting up their projects, each one eager to share their work with the judges and attendees. Ryan felt a flutter of nerves in his stomach as he stepped inside, but Elaine gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "You've got this," she said with a warm smile. "Remember, your work speaks for itself." Ryan nodded, taking a deep breath as he found his assigned table. He carefully set up his poster board, arranging the components with meticulous precision. His project, an innovative model for sustainable energy, was something he had poured his heart and soul into. It wasn't just a school assignment, it was a reflection of his passion and creativity. As the exhibition began, people started wandering through the rows of displays, stopping to admire the students' work. Ryan stood by his table, his hands clasped nervously in front of him. He wasn't sure how to explain his project to strangers, but he knew he had to try. The first few interactions were awkward, but as more people stopped by, Ryan began to find his rhythm. He explained his ideas with growing confidence, his face lighting up as he described the details of his model. Some of the attendees were visibly impressed, nodding and asking thoughtful questions. At one point, a man in a suit approached the table, his eyes scanning the poster board with interest. "This is impressive," he said, his tone warm. "Did you come up with this concept on your own?" Ryan nodded, his voice steady. "Yes, sir. I wanted to find a way to use renewable energy sources more efficiently, so I designed this system." The man smiled, extending a hand. "Well done, young man. I'm on the board of the city's Energy Commission, and I think your ideas have real potential. Keep up the great work." Ryan shook his hand, a surge of pride swelling in his chest. For the first time that day, he felt truly confident in himself. As the exhibition continued, Ryan's table became one of the most popular stops. Word spread about his innovative project, and more people came by to see it for themselves. Elaine and Thomas watched from a distance, their hearts swelling with pride as they saw their son shine. "He's incredible," Elaine said, her voice thick with emotion. Thomas nodded, his eyes never leaving Ryan. "He's going to change the world." When the judges announced the winners later that afternoon, Ryan's name was called for first place. The room erupted into applause as he walked to the stage to accept his award, his face glowing with happiness. Elaine and Thomas clapped the loudest, tears streaming down their faces as they watched their son achieve something extraordinary. The ride home that evening was filled with laughter and celebration. Ryan held his trophy tightly, a proud smile on his face as he recounted the day's events. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly seen and valued, not just by his parents, but by the world. As they pulled into their driveway, Elaine turned to Ryan with a thoughtful expression. "You know, sweetheart," she said, "what happened on the bus this morning doesn't define you. What defines you is how you handled it, with grace, strength, and determination." Ryan nodded, his smile soft but genuine. I think I'm starting to understand that." Thomas placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his voice filled with pride. "You're unstoppable, Ryan. Never forget that." As the family stepped inside their home, the warmth of their love and support surrounded Ryan like a comforting blanket. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, but he also knew he wasn't facing them alone. And in that moment, as he placed his trophy on the mantle, Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. That evening, after the excitement of the day had settled, Ryan sat at the dining table with his parents. The trophy gleamed under the soft glow of the overhead light, taking pride of place in the center of the table. Dinner had been celebratory, his favorite dishes carefully prepared by his mom, but now a comfortable silence had fallen over the room. Elaine looked at her son, her heart full of admiration. "Ryan," she said, breaking the quiet, "I want you to know just how proud I am of you. Not just for winning today, but for how you handled everything." Ryan looked up from the paper he had been doodling on, a small smile tugging at his lips. "It was a hard day," he admitted, "but I guess I'm glad I didn't let it stop me." Thomas leaned forward, his voice warm but firm. "And that's what matters, son. The world isn't always kind, but how you choose to respond makes all the difference. Today, you proved that you can rise above anything." Ryan nodded, his confidence growing. I think I'm ready to start taking the bus more. On my own." Elaine's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but she quickly smiled. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. If that's what you want, we'll support you every step of the way. It's just, I don't want to let one bad experience make me afraid forever," Ryan said quietly. "I want to show myself that I can handle it." Thomas placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder, his grip reassuring. "That's brave of you, Ryan. And if you ever need us, you know we're just a call away." Ryan nodded, his smile growing. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of control over his life, a feeling that he was capable of facing the challenges ahead. The next morning, Ryan woke up early, determined to take the bus to school. He packed his backpack carefully, double-checking that he had everything he needed for the day. Elaine watched him from the kitchen, her heart swelling with both pride and worry. She couldn't help but feel protective of her son, but she knew this was an important step for him. "Do you need me to walk you to the stop?" she asked as Ryan slung his backpack over his shoulder. Ryan shook his head, his expression resolute. "I'll be okay, Mom. Thanks." Elaine smiled and kissed his forehead. "Have a great day, sweetheart. And remember, you're amazing." Ryan left the house with a deep breath, heading to the bus stop. The air was crisp and cool, the morning sun casting a golden glow over the neighborhood. As he reached the stop, he saw a few other students waiting, chatting quietly among themselves. He stood a little apart from them, focusing on the rhythm of his breathing to keep himself calm. When the bus pulled up, Ryan hesitated for only a moment before stepping aboard. This time, the driver was a kind-looking woman who greeted him with a smile. "Good morning," she said warmly. "Good morning," Ryan replied, his voice soft but steady. He swiped his bus card, and it worked on the first try. Relief washed over him as he moved to find a seat. He chose a spot near the middle of the bus, away from the chatter of the other students. As the bus rolled forward, Ryan looked out the window, feeling a sense of accomplishment. He had done it. He had faced his fear and taken the first step toward reclaiming his independence. Over the next few weeks, Ryan continued to grow more comfortable with taking the bus. Each ride became a little easier, and he began to notice the small acts of kindness around him. The way passengers helped each other, the friendly smiles exchanged between strangers. It reminded him that not everyone in the world was like the first driver he had encountered. At school, Ryan's confidence began to blossom. His teachers noticed the change in him. He was more engaged in class, more willing to participate in discussions. His peers, too, began to see him in a new light. The shy, quiet boy who had once kept to himself was now someone they admired for his intelligence and determination. One afternoon, as Ryan waited at the bus stop to go home, a classmate approached him. It was Ethan, one of the more popular kids in school. Ryan wasn't sure why Ethan was talking to him. He usually stayed within his own circle of friends. "Hey, Ryan," Ethan said, shifting his backpack on his shoulder. "I heard about your project. That's really cool, man." Ryan blinked in surprise. "Thanks," he said cautiously. "No, seriously," Ethan continued. "I could never come up with something like that. You're like really smart." Ryan felt a flicker of pride but didn't know how to respond. I like science," he said simply. Ethan grinned. "Well, keep it up. You're gonna do big things, I can tell." Ryan nodded, a small smile forming on his face. As the bus pulled up, he realized that maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. Meanwhile, Thomas and Elaine continued to advocate for change within the city's transit system. The incident with the first driver had been reported, and the transit authority had launched an investigation. Thomas used his influence to push for better training for drivers, emphasizing the importance of treating all passengers with respect, regardless of their circumstances. Elaine, on the other hand, focused on raising awareness about autism and the challenges faced by individuals on the spectrum. She organized workshops and seminars, partnering with local organizations to educate the community. Her passion for the cause resonated with many, and the events quickly gained traction. One evening, as the family sat together in the living room, Elaine shared some exciting news. "We've been invited to speak at the annual Autism Awareness Gala," she said, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "They want us to share our story and talk about the work we're doing." Ryan looked up from the book he was reading. "Do I have to speak too?" Elaine smiled gently. "Only if you want to, sweetheart. No pressure." Ryan considered it for a moment. The idea of speaking in front of a large crowd was daunting, but he knew how important the event was. "Maybe I could say a few words," he said hesitantly. Thomas beamed. "That's my boy." The night of the gala was a grand affair. The venue was beautifully decorated, with elegant table settings and soft lighting creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. Ryan sat between his parents, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. He glanced at the program on the table, his name listed alongside his parents as speakers. When it was their turn to take the stage, Elaine spoke first, sharing the story of their family and the challenges they had faced. Her words were heartfelt and inspiring, and the audience hung on every word. Thomas followed, discussing the importance of inclusion and the steps being taken to improve accessibility and understanding in the community. Finally, it was Ryan's turn. He took a deep breath as he stepped up to the microphone, the bright lights making it hard to see the faces in the crowd. "Hi," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm Ryan. I just wanted to say, thank you for being here tonight. It means a lot to me and my family." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Sometimes, the world can feel really hard to navigate. But I've learned that there are good people out there, people who care, who want to make things better. My parents are two of those people, and I'm really proud of them." The audience erupted into applause, their warmth and support filling the room. Ryan smiled, a feeling of pride and belonging washing over him. As the family left the gala that night, Ryan felt a sense of hope and possibility. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, but he also knew he had the strength to face them, and the love of his family to support him every step of the way. As the car glided through the quiet streets on their way home from the gala, Ryan leaned his head against the window, staring out at the glittering city lights. He felt something new, a warmth in his chest that wasn't anxiety or nervousness but pride. Speaking at the gala had been terrifying, yes, but the applause and support he received afterward made it all worth it. For once, he didn't feel like the odd one out. He felt seen, valued, and celebrated. Elaine glanced at him from the front seat, catching his reflection in the rearview mirror. "You were amazing tonight, Ryan," she said softly. "Do you realize how many people you inspired?" Ryan hesitated, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight. "I just wanted people to know how much you and Dad helped me," he said quietly. Thomas, driving beside Elaine, chuckled. "You're too modest, son. Sure, we might help you, but you're the one who's changing hearts. You were the star tonight." Ryan felt his cheeks flush, and he looked down at his hands, smiling to himself. "Thanks, Dad." Elaine reached back, placing a reassuring hand on his knee. "You've come so far, Ryan. I hope you know how proud we are of you." Ryan nodded, holding on to her words as they arrived home. The following morning, the family was flooded with messages. Elaine's phone buzzed with texts and emails from attendees of the gala, many of them praising Ryan's courage and eloquence. Some were even from parents of autistic children who shared how much Ryan's speech had meant to them. As Elaine read one particularly heartfelt email aloud, tears welled up in her eyes. "This woman says her son hasn't spoken in public since he was 9, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But after hearing Ryan, he wants to try again." Ryan sat at the kitchen table, eating his cereal. He looked up, surprised. "He wants to speak, because of me? Because you gave him hope?" Elaine said, smiling at her son. "You showed him that it's okay to be scared but to try anyway." Thomas entered the kitchen, holding his tablet. "Ryan, you're not just inspiring kids. I've got a message here from the city's transit authority. They want to meet with us." Elaine raised her eyebrows. "Really? What for?" "They've been working on a new initiative to make public transportation more inclusive," Thomas explained. "And they want Ryan to help represent the voice of people with disabilities." Ryan froze, his spoon hovering midair. "Me? They want me to represent?" Thomas nodded. "They see how much impact you're already making, son. They want your input on how to improve their training programs for drivers and how to make the system more accessible." Ryan's heart raced at the thought. "I don't know, Dad. What if I mess up? What if I don't say the right things?" "You'll do great," Elaine said gently. "You always do. Just speak from your heart, like you did at the gala. That's all anyone needs to hear." Ryan hesitated but eventually nodded. "But I'll try." A week later, Ryan and his parents arrived at the Transit Authority's headquarters for the meeting. The building was intimidating, tall, sleek, and bustling with activity. Ryan's palms felt clammy as he followed his parents inside, clutching his notebook tightly. They were greeted by a man named Mr. Lawrence, the head of the Transit Authority. He was a tall, affable man with a warm smile that put Ryan at ease. "Ryan, it's an honor to meet you," Mr. Lawrence said, shaking his hand. "I've heard so much about you." Ryan nodded shyly. "Thank you for inviting me." "We should be thanking you," Mr. Lawrence replied. "Your story has already made waves in our department. It's why we're launching this initiative, and we'd love for you to be part of it." The meeting room was filled with people from various departments, drivers, trainers, and policymakers. Ryan sat between his parents, feeling the weight of their expectant gazes. But as the discussion began, he found himself growing more comfortable. The team genuinely wanted to hear his thoughts, and they listened intently as he shared his experiences. He talked about the importance of patience and empathy, recounting how the first driver's harsh words had made him feel small and unwelcome. But he also shared how the kind drivers he'd met afterward had helped restore his confidence. "Sometimes," Ryan said, his voice steady, "a smile or a kind word can make all the difference. It shows people that you care, that they matter." The room was silent for a moment before one of the trainers spoke up. "Ryan, that's exactly the kind of perspective we need. Thank you for sharing." By the end of the meeting, Ryan felt a sense of accomplishment. Mr. Lawrence promised to keep him updated on the progress of the initiative, and he left the building feeling lighter than he had in weeks. As the months passed, the Transit Authority's new initiative began to take shape. Ryan became a key figure in its development, working alongside trainers to create educational materials and participating in workshops for drivers. His contributions were celebrated, and he even appeared in a promotional video to raise awareness about the program. The first time Ryan saw himself on screen, he couldn't believe it. "I look confident," he said, almost in disbelief. "You are confident," Elaine said, beaming at him. "Look at everything you've accomplished." Ryan smiled, feeling a warmth he couldn't quite put into words. He was finally starting to believe in himself. One day, as Ryan waited for the bus to school, he noticed something unusual. The driver who pulled up wasn't the kind woman he had grown accustomed to. It was the same man who had insulted him months ago. Ryan's heart sank, and for a moment he considered waiting for the next bus. But then he took a deep breath and stepped aboard. The driver's face turned pale when he saw Ryan. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Oh, good morning," he said, his voice hesitant. "Good morning," Ryan replied, his tone polite but firm. He swiped his card and found a seat near the middle of the bus. As the bus rolled forward, Ryan couldn't help but notice how different the driver seemed. He was quieter, more attentive to the passengers. When an elderly woman boarded, he got out of his seat to help her with her bags. When a young child started crying, he smiled and offered a kind word to the frazzled mother. It wasn't until Ryan was getting off at his stop that the driver finally spoke to him again. "Hey kid," he said, his voice low. I wanted to say I'm sorry for how I treated you before. I was wrong." Ryan looked at him for a long moment before nodding. "Thank you," he said simply. As he walked away, Ryan felt a sense of closure. He didn't need an elaborate apology or an explanation, just the acknowledgement that he had been wronged and that it wouldn't happen again. By the time Ryan graduated from high school, he had become a well-known advocate for autism awareness and accessibility. He continued to work with the Transit Authority, and his efforts inspired similar programs in other cities. His parents couldn't have been prouder, and Ryan himself felt the sense of purpose he had never imagined possible. At his graduation ceremony, Ryan was asked to give a speech as the valedictorian. As he stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, he took a deep breath and began. "Sometimes, life gives us challenges that seem too big to handle. But I've learned that with the right support and a little courage, we can overcome anything. To anyone out there who feels like they don't belong, you do. Your voice matters. And your story can change the world." The crowd erupted into applause, and as Ryan stepped down from the stage, his parents enveloped him in a tight hug. "We love you so much," Elaine whispered, tears streaming down her face. Ryan smiled, his heart full. "I love you too." And in that moment, he knew that the future was brighter than he had ever imagined. The summer after Ryan's high school graduation was a whirlwind of activity. His growing influence in the autism awareness community had opened up new opportunities. Invitations poured in from schools, organizations, and even city councils, all eager to hear his perspective and include him in discussions about accessibility and inclusivity. But for Ryan, the most exciting development was his acceptance to the university of his dreams. He had been admitted to a prestigious engineering program, one that focused on renewable energy, his passion. The same project that had won him first place at the science exhibition was now the foundation for his future career. Ryan was both thrilled and nervous, but his parents reminded him of how far he had already come. "You've proven that you can do anything you set your mind to," Thomas told him one evening as they packed boxes for his dorm room. "College is just the next step, and I know you're going to thrive." Elaine smiled as she folded Ryan's favorite hoodie. "And remember, sweetheart, we're only a phone call away if you need us." Ryan nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thanks, Ma. Thanks, Div. I wouldn't be here without you." The day they dropped him off at the university was bittersweet. Ryan's dorm room was small but cozy, with a large window overlooking the campus courtyard. He carefully unpacked his belongings, placing his books and notebooks in neat rows on the shelf. His trophy from the science exhibition took pride of place on his desk, a reminder of how far he'd come. As they said their goodbyes, Elaine hugged him tightly. "You're going to do amazing things here, Ryan. I just know it." Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. "And don't forget to call us once in a while, okay?" Ryan smiled, though his chest felt heavy. "I will. I promise." Watching his parents drive away was harder than he expected. For the first time, he was truly on his own. But as he turned back toward his dorm, he reminded himself that this was what he had worked for. This was his chance to prove to himself that he could succeed. College life was an adjustment. The bustling campus, the unfamiliar faces, the demanding coursework. It was overwhelming at times. But Ryan quickly found his rhythm. He joined the university's Renewable Energy Club, where he met other students who shared his passion for science and innovation. For the first time, he felt like he truly belonged. One of his professors, Dr. Patel, took a special interest in him. She was an expert in sustainable energy systems and immediately recognized Ryan's potential. "Your project from high school is impressive," she told him after class one day. "I'd like to mentor you and help you develop it further. With some refinement, it could have real-world applications." Ryan was stunned. "Really? You think it's good enough for that?" Dr. Patel smiled. "I don't just think, it's obvious. You have a gift, Ryan, and I want to help you make the most of it." Under her guidance, Ryan began working on a new version of his project. He spent long hours in the lab, experimenting with different designs and materials. It was challenging, but he loved every minute of it. For the first time, he felt like he was on the verge of something big. Meanwhile, Ryan's advocacy work continued to grow. The Transit Authority's Inclusivity Initiative had been a resounding success, and other cities were starting to take notice. Ryan was invited to speak at a national conference on accessibility, where he shared his story and emphasized the importance of creating spaces that welcomed everyone. His speech was met with a standing ovation, and afterward, several attendees approached him with questions and words of encouragement. "You're an inspiration," one woman said, shaking his hand. "My son is on the spectrum, and seeing someone like you succeed gives me so much hope for his future." Ryan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "Thank you. That means a lot." He returned to campus feeling reinvigorated. He knew he had a responsibility to use his platform to make a difference, and he was determined to do just that. As the months turned into years, Ryan continued to thrive. His project, now renamed the Green Grid System, gained attention from professors, researchers, and even industry professionals. With Dr. Patel's help, he applied for a grant to fund further development, and to his astonishment, he won. The grant allowed him to build a prototype of the Green Grid System, which he presented at a major engineering conference. The response was overwhelming. Companies expressed interest in partnering with him, and several investors approached him about taking the project to the next level. But through it all, Ryan remained humble. He never forgot where he came from or the struggles he had overcome to get to this point. And he never stopped advocating for others on the spectrum, using his growing platform to raise awareness and push for change. One day, as Ryan was walking across campus, his phone buzzed with a call from his mother. He smiled as he answered, her familiar voice immediately putting him at ease. "Hi, sweetheart," Elaine said. "How's my brilliant engineer doing?" Ryan chuckled. "I'm doing good, Mom. Just busy with the project." "Well, I have some exciting news," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "Remember the gala where you gave your first speech?" "Of course," Ryan replied. "What about it?" "They've invited you back," Elaine said. "This time, as the keynote speaker." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. "Me? A keynote speaker?" "Yes, you," Elaine said with a laugh. "You've accomplished so much, Ryan. They want you to share your journey and talk about the incredible work you're doing." Ryan hesitated, the weight of the responsibility sinking in. "That's a big deal, Mom." "It is," Elaine agreed. "But you're ready for it." "I know you are." Ryan took a deep breath. "But I'll do it." The night of the gala arrived, and Ryan stood backstage, nervously adjusting his tie. He could hear the hum of conversation from the crowd, which included some of the most influential figures in the autism awareness community. His parents sat in the front row, beaming with pride. When it was time for him to speak, Ryan stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding him. He took a deep breath and looked out at the audience. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady. "My name is Ryan Carter, and I'm honored to be here tonight." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "When I was younger, I often felt like I didn't belong. The world felt overwhelming, and I didn't know how to navigate it. But with the support of my parents and the kindness of others, I learned that I had a voice that could make a difference. He went on to share his journey, from the humiliating encounter on the bus to his advocacy work and the development of the green grid system. He spoke about the importance of inclusion, the power of resilience, and the need to create a world where everyone felt valued. My hope, he concluded, is that my story will inspire others to see the potential in every individual, no matter their challenges. Because when we lift each other up, there's no limit to what we can achieve. The audience erupted into applause, and Ryan felt a wave of emotion wash over him. As he stepped off the stage, his parents enveloped him in a hug. "You were incredible," Elaine whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We're so proud of you, son," Thomas added, his voice thick with emotion. Ryan smiled, his heart full. He had come so far, and he knew this was just the beginning. Years later, Ryan's green grid system became a groundbreaking innovation in the renewable energy sector, transforming how communities accessed clean, sustainable power. His advocacy work also continued to thrive, and he remained a vocal champion for autism awareness and inclusion. But for Ryan, his greatest accomplishment wasn't the awards or the recognition, it was the lives he had touched along the way. He had turned his struggles into strength, proving that even in the face of adversity, it was possible to create something beautiful. And as he stood on the balcony of his office one evening, looking out at the city skyline, he couldn't help but feel grateful. For his parents, for the people who had believed in him, and for the journey that had brought him here. Ryan Carter, once a shy, misunderstood boy on a bus, had become a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that no dream was too big and no challenge too great. As Ryan stood on the balcony of his office, the hum of the city below reminded him of how far he had come. The green grid system was now implemented in multiple cities across the country, making renewable energy accessible and affordable for countless families. His office wasn't just a place of work, it was a hub for innovation, advocacy, and inclusion. And yet, even as he looked out at the vast skyline, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. The success of his career wasn't just about science or technology. It was about the people who had supported him, the lessons he had learned, and the unwavering belief that he could create change. Ryan felt a deep sense of responsibility to pay that forward. One day, Ryan received an email that stopped him in his tracks. It was from the same transit authority that had first implemented his suggestions all those years ago. They were inviting him to be the keynote speaker at the unveiling of their newest initiative, a nationwide campaign to make public transportation more accessible for people with disabilities. The email was filled with gratitude for Ryan's work and detailed how his story had inspired their ongoing efforts. Ryan read it twice, a mix of emotions washing over him. The memory of that humiliating bus ride was still vivid in his mind, but now, it felt like it had come full circle. He immediately called his parents to share the news. "They want me to speak at the launch of the campaign," he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Can you believe that?" Elaine's voice on the other end of the line was filled with pride. "Of course, we can believe it, sweetheart. You've worked so hard to make this happen." Thomas chimed in, "This is your moment, Ryan. It's a chance to show everyone what real change looks like." Ryan smiled. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." The day of the campaign launch arrived, and Ryan stood backstage, waiting for his turn to speak. The event was held at the city's largest conference center, packed with government officials, transit employees, and members of the public. Banners bearing the campaign slogan, "Access for All," hung from the walls, and the energy in the room was electric. As Ryan stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. He paused, taking a moment to soak it all in before approaching the microphone. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice steady but heartfelt. "Today is about more than transportation. It's about dignity, respect, and the belief that everyone deserves to feel welcome in public spaces." He went on to share the story of that pivotal day on the bus, the pain of being humiliated, the kindness of strangers who stood up for him, and the journey that followed. But he didn't dwell on the negative. Instead, he focused on the progress that had been made and the possibilities that lay ahead. "When I was a kid," Ryan said, "I never imagined that my voice could make a difference. But what I've learned is that even the smallest actions, whether it's a kind word, A smile, or standing up for someone who's being mistreated, can create ripples of change. He paused, looking out at the audience. This campaign isn't just about buses or trains. It's about creating a world where everyone feels valued. And I'm so proud to see how far we've come. The crowd gave him a standing ovation, and Ryan felt a swell of emotion. It wasn't just about the applause, it was about the knowledge that his story had helped spark something bigger than himself. After the event, Ryan was approached by a young man in his 20s who looked nervous but determined. "Hi," the man said, extending a hand. "My name's Kevin. I just wanted to say thank you. Hearing your story gave me the courage to speak up about the challenges I face every day." Ryan shook his hand, smiling warmly. "That means a lot, Kevin. Thank you for sharing that with me." Kevin hesitated, then added, "I've always wanted to work in advocacy, but I didn't think anyone would take me seriously. Now I'm starting to believe that maybe I can make a difference too." "You absolutely can," Ryan said firmly. "Your voice matters. And if you ever need support, don't hesitate to reach out." Kevin's face lit up, and Ryan could see the spark of hope in his eyes. It reminded him of how he had felt all those years ago, standing at the beginning of his own journey. As Ryan's work continued to grow, he began focusing on mentorship. He knew that his success wasn't just about his own efforts. It was about the people who had believed in him along the way. He wanted to be that person for others. He launched a program called Voices Rising, which provided resources and mentorship for young people on the autism spectrum who wanted to pursue careers in science, technology, and advocacy. The program offered scholarships, workshops, and one-on-one mentoring sessions with professionals in various fields. One of the first participants was a teenage girl named Emily, who had been struggling to find her place in the world. She was brilliant, with a passion for coding, but her anxiety often held her back. Ryan saw himself in her and took her under his wing. During one of their sessions, Emily hesitated before speaking. "Ryan," she said softly, "do you ever feel like no matter how hard you try, you'll never be good enough?" Ryan's heart ached at the vulnerability in her voice. "All the time," he admitted, "but I've learned that those feelings don't define us. What matters is what we do in spite of them." Emily nodded, her eyes brimming with determination. "I want to make a difference, like you." "You already are," Ryan said with a smile. "And I'll be here to help you every step of the way." As the years went by, Ryan's influence continued to grow. His green grid system became a cornerstone of sustainable energy infrastructure, and his advocacy work inspired countless others to join the fight for inclusion and accessibility. But for Ryan, the most meaningful moments were the personal connections. The emails from parents thanking him for giving their children hope, the conversations with young people who saw him as a role model, and the knowledge that he was making a tangible difference in people's lives. One day, as he was preparing for a meeting, Ryan received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, on plain stationery, and the familiar handwriting made his heart skip a beat. It was from the driver of that fateful bus ride so many years ago. "Dear Ryan," the letter began. "I've thought about that day on the bus more times than I can count. I know I can never undo the hurt I caused, but I want you to know that you changed my life. Watching you grow into the person you are today has been humbling and inspiring. I've spent the past few years trying to be better, to treat everyone with the kindness and respect they deserve. Thank you for showing me what that looks like. Sincerely, John." Ryan read the letter twice, his chest tight with emotion. He set it down carefully, staring at it for a long moment. It was a reminder that even the smallest moments could have a ripple effect, transforming not just his life, but the lives of others. In the years to come, Ryan's legacy would continue to grow. He became a symbol of resilience and hope, proof that no challenge was too great to overcome. And though the road had been long and difficult, Ryan wouldn't have changed a thing. Because every step of the journey, every obstacle he had faced, had led him to this moment. A life filled with purpose, connection, and the knowledge that he had made the world a little brighter for those who came after him.